Our last topic with the panel, and then we'll open it up to questions from everybody else, is about competitive pressures, which is a constant in business, obviously, and the consolidation that we're seeing in a lot of industries where larger players are buying up smaller players. And I wanted to chat with you about that, Rick, because you're in personal electronics, which is a fast-moving, constantly changing field, and of course consumer taste changes and technology changes just as quickly. How have you found the competitive pressures? How do you stay competitive in what is a very tightly competitive?
Yeah, I would say, a few years ago, some of the times our biggest competition was if we weren't an exclusive distributor of a brand. You mentioned Fitbit, one of the brands that we have, and there was two distributors. You're actually competing against each other for the same business, which is really just a race to the bottom on price. We haven't done that, I would say, in 10 or 15 years. So either we're an exclusive on the brand, or if there's a second player that either was already in the market. Typically, when we come into play, someone's already in the market, not that we are in the market and we're not capturing a certain area, because we have a very broad base of customers. But in some cases, there's already an incumbent that's there. They've got a few customers, and then we're brought on to kind of take over the rest of the market. So it's always segregated. So that part, there isn't competition. Where there's a lot more competition, though, is if we just take a look at the retail landscape today. So, all the major customers we talk to, there's a lot less traffic coming through the door, especially malls. Mall traffic's been down for about a year and a half now. So if the traffic's down, there's less people coming in the stores, which translates to less revenue going through for the stores, and margin dollars as well. And when we talk to some of our suppliers, especially our American suppliers, they know we're 10% of their population, but we tell them it costs us as much to build a Best Buy store here as it does in the US and to staff it. But at best, it's only 10% of the business that's coming through, which means there's a lot more margin requirements. It's not unheard of for Best Buy in Canada to ask for 5 or 10% more margin than Best Buy does in the US. And on top of that, they may want placement fees or monthly fees to take a 2-foot section or 4-foot section. They might want $100 a month or $200 a month, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're going into 150 or 200 stores, it starts to add up month after month, right? So we're seeing a lot more competitive pressures there, and so the retailers need to make more margin. We're getting pushed more and more for that. And even some simple things where they want to rejuvenate the stores. Typically, they would cover that under their existing margin. Now they're coming back to vendors and saying, we want to charge another 2% now on everything we want. We're going to take a 2% deduction off of our invoice because we want to renovate our stores, which we normally wouldn't pay for. So the margin that's left really needs to come from the distributor and the vendor, right? So it's how do you sort that out between the two? And if you can't sort it out between the two, then the middle guy, which is the distributor, if there's not enough value there and there's a way to go around you, then you can actually get pulled out of the equation. So it's constant for us to continue to add value. But what we are seeing that's positive to us in this whole thing is things have changed, is that the retailers now do not have the same amount of staff they had before as far as buying and procurement of products. And some of the talent they're getting on board as well, too, is not at the same level that they used to have. As we talked about talent, there's a big push out there for who's going to get the best guys, right? And so some cases you have these big retailers and they either are lacking people or the talent they have is not strong enough, which puts more emphasis on our value proposition. And we're seeing the same thing on the vendor side, quite honestly, as well, too, whether it's vendors from Europe or vendors from the US. Same thing, the margin's not as strong as it was, so they're cutting down their staff, so they're either under-resourced or the people they're bringing on are much more junior. And they don't understand the complexities of Canada, and so we've got a system with that. So we're constantly looking at how do we add as much value as we can. It looks like it's becoming easier for us to add value, but as our margin shrinks, are we being rewarded for what we're doing? Is it profitable for us to do the business? So we're constantly analyzing that.
Mm-hmm. And how do you spot new products? I mean, you've got successful products, but of course everything changes. How do you stay competitive with the next wave of consumer?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly out there looking on what's going on. We have good relationships with the customers, so they know their demographics and kind of what's going on there. Of course, we attend trade shows and that, which used to work. In the past, you'd go to a trade show, you see kind of latest product, and then kind of introduce it to the marketplace. But now with the internet and so forth, many of our customers are already reaching out to these vendors all over the world. So it's up to us to kind of envision what's next. We've always been, we talk about leading edge companies, we've always been what I call a bleeding edge company. Even I go back to my Nokia days. I helped to design the very first Nokia branded phone worldwide. So it's a matter of getting the right products out there at the right time. So I'd say we're typically way ahead on what we need. If I give the example of Fitbit, which everybody can relate to, we started chasing Fitbit when it was a startup company But it's trying to find those Fitbits. Fitbits or Nest was another one that was an early starter that did really, really well. And then there's hundreds of brands, thousands of brands that didn't go anywhere. So it's trying to pick the right ones.
So just to tie that back with what we talked about, culture and transparency and communication, there must be quite an appetite for risk in looking at those new products and new ventures. How do you encourage that in your executive or your leadership team?
We're fairly open with it. I think it's still, even after 31 years, I think it's still a challenge trying to find the right brand and when do you say yes or no. So we typically, we're out there looking for new brands on our own. We're quite fortunate that we get a lot of brands referred to us from major retailers or other vendors in the market that say you want to work in Canada, you need to work with Microcell. They're quite different and offer a lot of advantages over other people that are out there today. But then we go into a discovery call with them and start to analyze who they are. It's like going on a date, right? So then you date these people a few times, you find out a little bit more about them, but typically over 2 or 3 months maximum, sometimes only 30 days, you've decided whether you're going to marry these guys and you're going to work with this brand now going forward, right? And so you got to make sure that the brand is strong enough so you can have great products in wrong company, right? And sometimes great company, bad product. Yep. I'd rather have a great company and product that's not that good. I can make it successful, but if I have a great product and I don't have the support, we get into trouble with the retailers very quickly. And I've got a relationship where we got to continue to sell them more products, right? So we can't afford for something to go wrong and get stuck in a store, right? So we keep it fairly open with our executives that we're working with to kind of make those decisions. I'd say even just in the last year, there's been so many changes. We've tightened up our process on selecting, and they basically will recommend back to us. Initially, it might be a great idea, but then we just had one this month actually where we were just getting ready to sign it, but we decided to do a further deep dive, and we found some other red flags that potentially could be an issue. And after a lot of work, 2-3 months worth of work, decided to kill it before we even launch it, which is the best thing to do. Once you've got inventory, it becomes a bigger problem.
Mm. Ed, how do you find competitive pressures in your business? You've got software there's so many experts and brilliant minds throughout the world that are competing on that front. How do you stay competitive?
It's a great question. I think, let me just do our industry first so people get kind of an understanding. We're probably a $60 billion industry, and no one owns more than 6% of that industry. So there are tons and tons and tons of players. There's probably 8 dominant system integrators, maybe 12 dominant system integrators that most people in this room would know these folks because of their global presence, but any one of them doesn't have more than 6% market share. So for us, we're always trying to find ways to place bets on innovation. And for us, we really have to say, focus, and really trying to say to folks, where do you fit in this massive competitive landscape should you play? And there is a new technology every week that comes out that we could actually attach ourselves to. I can't tell you how many people would like us to help to implement their product. And basically, we go to market as technology agnostic, so we're not telling people that you should do this versus that. We're telling you that there are some great options that you can actually work with, and we're going to spend some time helping you understand the best fit for your organization. But we've placed a bet on AI, for example, and for us, when we're doing custom development for enterprise class companies, Toyota is a big customer of ours. We really have to understand how AI is actually going to be written in the software for every single product in the next few years. But blockchain was one that was coming up a few years ago, and we had to say, okay, where's our money going to go? Is it going to go into building a blockchain practice, or is it going to go into building an AI practice? And for us, it was a pretty strong bet that we said AI is where we're going to place our money and our expertise. And it's not saying that blockchain isn't useful in some industries, but for us, the AI is the better long-term bet. Quantum computing is coming that's going to actually help rewrite most of the security infrastructure around everything that all software does. But right now, it's too early for us to actually do heavy investments in quantum computing. Quantum computing is a 5 to 10 year thing that is going to come, that's going to actually say all the encryptions that exist inside a software that allow you to actually do your banking, for example, are going to have to be rewritten. It's Y2K on steroids for companies like mine. It's kind of that year when everybody has to rewrite their security codes. So we have to be aware that that's coming, but we have to place our bets at the right time in this entirely competitive market as to when is the right time to invest our money. And AI is kind of our bet in the near term for the next 2 or 3 years, where we think it's going to help accelerate our growth.
And how did you make that decision about betting on AI? Was that, did you sound out your customers? Did you have a really robust internal discussion? How did you come to that?
One of the pleasant parts about my business is I've got lots of smart people who I've worked with for a long period of time. So I've got a core of 12 guys and girls who have been with me since right around the year 2000. And, smart people out of Waterloo, out of U of T, out of the best Canadian universities that I trust. And, we kind of kick them around. And believe me, the discussions about blockchain continue to this day. And there's a lot of folks who are basically telling me, you're nuts keeping us away from blockchain. And I'm basically the guy who has to say, all right, I'm going to trust my instincts, and what's the right way to place our bets. But I listen to a lot of people, and I do a lot of reading and go to a lot of conferences. And at the end of the day, it's my company, and I got to actually place some bets. And I know when you did Fitbit, you placed a bet.
Yep.
When you decided to be a contract design company, you had to place a big bet that basically said, all right, I'm going to trust my instincts, and I'm going to go with my instincts on it. So, end of the day, I think all of us in this room are successful because we have good instincts. And I think at the end of the day, you're going to listen to people, but you have to place bets. If you don't place bets, you don't have a chance.
Thank you. Mike, you're in a competitive world as well. You mentioned exporting to the U.S., and I know you've said there's some big players down in the furniture business in the U.S. How do you compete with them? What's your approach?
Well, it's product and distribution are issues. This world seems to have this insatiable need for new product. It used to be that if you, we try to fill niches because we're a smaller player. Traditionally in our industry, there were the big systems companies that would go in and put all your workstations in and then do the task shares, and then they'd leave. And we would roll in at that point and pick up all the ancillary furniture, like what about this room and what about that room? And that was our business. So we became very good at doing little niches, like what's missing? We listen very carefully to our clients and we do that. But we're actually driven by the technology world. So if you look at the history of my business, the first chairs were the big exec sitting at a big desk with his feet up on and calling his secretary in and on the IBM Selectric. Well, that's a very different contract seating market than the desktop. So then all of a sudden the desktop, which everyone had to do their own work, they have to sit differently. And then of course but we still had our lanes. There's still the systems people and the chair people and the tech stuff. Well, it all changed when wireless came into play. Yeah. So all of a sudden, I'm sure everyone in this room has an office that's either changing or changed or will change to more of an open office concept where there's desking and everyone sits at the desk, and then you get up and you take your computer and go over there and work. And so in the last 10 years, we've had to totally adapt our product line. And while we've adapted our product line to the technology, so we're watching the technology world constantly. Like, what's happening? We have to adapt our product to it. The systems all went away. So these big, large players all of a sudden had to look at their market and say, well, my goodness, we have to do collaborative seating and ancillary seating now. And they didn't have it. So all of a sudden, we started to get into this consolidated world, where they're starting to buy up all the players that do what I do. And so we've decided to stay independent and compete with that. But now we're competing directly head on with the very large companies in certain categories. And that's a little discerning, given that they own the distribution and we're an open line and we have to sell our products through their dealers. So we've had to up our service game. Our service game was pretty strong, but we've had to take it and put it on steroids and really ramp it up so that no dealer of any of the large companies ever wants to lose Kielhauer as a supplier, because we're hassle-free, they make money off of us, we have the right product. We have to have all the answers all the time and be better than everybody else. And that's how we're dealing with that element of it. So that's
and I think you mentioned before that your focus had been on some of the interior design firms as an avenue to your customers, and now, as you were just saying, you're focusing more on dealers and trying to get that channel a bit more active.
Yes, well, the designers are still our major source of specification. We've embraced the dealer community in a different way, where it used to be a little bit antagonistic just because the presence of these large manufacturers. but now we're embracing them in a much different way. We've determined that our customer experience starts from product leaving our door to going to the customer's door, which means that all the way through it, we have to manage it and make it easy, comfortable for all, which means that our dealers who pick it up sort of halfway in for the installations, and we want them to be loyal and we want to make it easy for them. So we've shifted our perspective a little bit. So it's always a fluid marketplace. I think all of us have a fluid market. It's, every day we wake up and go, what now? You know, you check off all your boxes. Yep, that product's working, that's working, that's working, that's working. Okay, what do I have to look at now? Okay, what's the next market? Where are we going? Like, it takes us 2 years to create a product for the market. So that means that today, I'm talking to my design staff about the needs of the customer 2 years from now. That's a long time. So, you know, forget all the market research and all of that. You look around, you talk to your customers, you look at the market, you kind of anticipate, and you make some gut decisions about your direction, and then you go at it. And then you remain flexible enough to make adaptations as you're going, so that when you get there, you know, if you say you're going there, but it ends up over there, you just have to sort of move it a little bit as you're going to get to the right place. So the flexibility has to be there. I'm sure you guys all, every day you're looking at how are we going to shift this? How do we change it? Is it right? I mean, we start a product, by the time we take it to market, we start developing it, we'll have thought of 5 different additions to the product line as we're looking at it, going, oh, we should add that, we should add that. You know, my engineering department goes mad. What do you mean you're adding? You're adding what? You're adding that. But guys, it's the customer needs it. Oh yeah, that's always your line, isn't it? But it's true. We're all adapting to our customers. We can't forget the customer in any of this. Yeah. All of what we're doing here is about that customer. It always comes back to the customer. Our products, our culture, our
well said.
Everything. Yep. It's always about our customer.
Yep.
Well, thank you. That's a great topic or point to turn now to the general discussion. It's all about the customer. I like that very much. And it's about taking bets about what customers will want in future and how to anticipate and support and address those needs.